Let's start going over these dynamic MIDI sources. I'm going to break this up into 8 videos, but I am going to skip the real-time parameter control assign and clock advance since I've gone over those in previous videos. Before I go into examples, I want to let you know that the global tempo needs to be set on internal in order to modulate the tempo with a dynamic MIDI source. If it's set to external, then that external source will control the tempo no matter what. Likewise, if you're just using the Kronos alone and you have the Kronos clock set to like external USB, then you won't be able to modulate the global tempo. With that being said, I do have Karma functioning off of its own internal clock right now. So let's get into examples. Right now I have slider 1 as my modulation source. It's best to use controller type sources as opposed to note or velocity for controlling tempo, just because that makes the most sense. But you can do whatever you want in Karma. I am mainly going to be focusing on examples using just controller sources instead of walking through what it's like to use every single different kind of controller source. In this case, slider 1 is going to be what we use to demonstrate what it's like to send anything from CC value 0 to 127. And it's nice because you get this little visual here where you can actually see the values. So with polarity set to plus, I can now control tempo with this slider. By the way, whenever you're using these real-time sliders or switches, it's sent from the master layer as opposed to one of the module layers. So when I play this and I go up to 127, we're at twice the tempo. So I'm at 80 BPM, but right now I'm effectively at 160 BPM. If I were to flip the polarity and have it on minus, then at a value of 127, I would be at half the tempo, going from 80 down to 40 BPM. If I had something like plus minus, then anything below 64 will gradually decrease the tempo, and then above will increase the tempo. So the full range of the slider now is from 40 BPM to 160 BPM. Minus is just the opposite. We would go from 160 BPM down to 40. Now let me start explaining what happens when we start ranging the bottom and top. Let's start with plus. And with the bottom now at 64, I'll get no change in tempo all the way in this bottom range. And then that range from 80 BPM to 160 is all just within the top half of the slider. I should let you know that when the bottom is set to 64, it simply isn't reading anything from 63 to 0. It's not getting that CC data at all. Let me show you what it's like to compress everything into the bottom range. Predictably, in this case, our tempo will be at no change at 0, and then times 2 at 64. Anything above that won't have an effect. So that behavior is pretty intuitive. And I don't think I even need to go over minus because you probably know what it's going to act like. It's when we get into plus minus that things start to become a little trickier. So you would expect that we've compressed the full range from 40 to 160 just within this bottom half of the slider, right? But it actually doesn't work like that. If we have our bottom at 0 and our top at 64, then we're actually only getting the bottom half effects of the plus minus polarity. So I'm only slowing down the tempo in this bottom range down to 40. And actually at 64, we're just at normal tempo. Anything above that doesn't matter. Likewise, if I had my bottom at 64 and my top at 127, then we'd only get the effects of speeding up the tempo, and then down here wouldn't do anything. So let's check out what switches do. Use real-time switch 1, and I'll have the action on momentary. In this case, the bottom and top values actually don't do anything. I can have these set to whatever, and no matter what, when this switch is on, we'll be outputting ×2. When it's off, we'll have no change in tempo. That's with our polarity on plus. Likewise, if the polarity is on minus, of course, I'll have the tempo when this switch is on. If the action were on continuous, though, then this basically behaves as if it's setting out a CC value of 127 when it's on and 0 when it's off. But if this isn't reading those CC numbers because they're out of the range of the bottom and top, then the switch actually won't do anything. I would need this at 0 and 127 in order for this switch to behave normally. And in that case, you know, I might as well just have it on momentary anyway. Toggle should be pretty obvious. It's just every other press will create an effect on the tempo. Yeah, and I don't think I really need to go over other types of control sources like note numbers or velocity. Just know that the note number is analogous to the CC value, and the velocity value would be analogous to the CC value if you're using a velocity source. And then otherwise, everything behaves just exactly how you would expect with all the examples that we just went over. So that's it for global tempo. I think that's everything you need to know. I'm pretty sure you probably have a pretty darn good understanding of it now. Just again, you need to make sure that the Kronos or Karma, the Karma software in this case, is functioning off of its own internal clock if you want to modulate the global tempo. Otherwise, it won't have any effect. And that could be really confusing. So that's it.